Hi, this is Michelle, and the topic for today is structuring legally compliant token cells, and we have Lee Slider, a partner at Dormant Will and Emery with us. Lee, are you there?
I'm here. How are you doing, Michelle?
Awesome. I'm so excited about talking to you.
Okay, but I got to put in a plug for a different Jimi Hendrix song for later on today. If you have Hush Now, which he did with the Curtis Knight Band,
Okay.
it is absolutely phenomenal, very trippy, psychedelic, and really worth listening to.
Okay, what's the name of the song again?
Hush Now.
Hush Now.
Hush Now. Okay, we're looking for it right now. I have 4 of his CDs right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jimmy did tons of great stuff, but I have like a little special place in my heart for Hush Now, which just to me just is like beautiful psychedelic guitar.
Yeah, it's probably we have a whole set here, so it's probably here somewhere.
Great. All right, sorry, I got us distracted from blockchain tokens.
Which is interesting too.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So Lee, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure, and let me just start by reminding everybody I'm not giving legal advice over the air here or anything like that. People can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on the McDermott, Will, and Emery website. I do a podcast called Appetite for Disruption. You can reach me lots of different ways, and I'd love to hear from people.
Awesome. So Lee, I met you at Berkeley at Blockchain, and you're super awesome. And I read all your materials. Also have it on my ICO best practices list.
Wow. Thank you.
So I have no idea what your background is. So can you tell us about your background and what your story is?
Yeah. So I'm a financial services and technology lawyer. I practice in New York, or at least that's my home base, but I tend to travel quite a bit. I'm in the Bay Area at least 6 or 8 times a year. I've been practicing for 25 years. I've been both an in-house lawyer at some financial services companies and an outside lawyer. Sometimes we refer to ourselves as outhouse lawyers, but an outside lawyer at a couple different law firms. I joined McDermott about 3 months ago. I came from Debevoise and Plimpton, which was also a great firm, but expanding my practice here at McDermott now.
Wow. In terms of token cells, or some people call that as ICO, which stands for Initial Coin Offering, when did you first heard of it?
So I first sort of got into this space about 18 months ago. I was talking with some of the folks over at Coinbase. They were interested in the securities law analysis around blockchain tokens and token launches and ICOs. They weren't called ICOs back then, at least I don't think so. But I started talking with them about that, and together with them and a couple of other folks, we developed a securities law framework for blockchain tokens, which is on the Coinbase blog. They open sourced it at the beginning of December of 2016. And I'll tell you, from the minute that I started talking with them about blockchain tokens and altcoins and whatnot, I knew that this was something that I wanted to be involved with because I thought it was really cool. I saw blockchain technology as really being able to make some really interesting changes in the way people do things in the world. And it really appealed to my sense of decentralization and taking responsibility for what you're doing, et cetera.
Awesome. When did you first worked on a token cell?
So I started working on token launches just about a year ago. I've had a number of clients over the course of that time. We've had kind of lost track of the exact number of token sale clients we've had, but it's something like a dozen, and we're working on another probably 12 or 15 projects right now in various stages. And some of the projects we do everything soup to nuts, but often we're just called in to consult either for particular U.S. law issues or just for some particular piece of what's going on with the project. So we like all of the different work.
Awesome. I just want to let everybody know that a token cell is pretty much global from day one. So it involves, sometimes multiple attorneys from different locations to be compliant.
And that's a super important point that you're making, Michelle. And frankly, one of the other things that attracted me about blockchain. Anybody with a computer and an internet connection can get involved on any of the open source decentralized blockchains. So when you do a token sale, when you launch a blockchain project, it's a global phenomenon, and you're really bringing together a community of people from around the world.
Yeah. And that emphasis is, on decentralization, which people play a big part of, and from around the world. I'm going to ask you about, the biggest debate on Earth right now. What are your thoughts on utility versus security?
Well, I hope that question is not the biggest debate on Earth right now. I think there's a few other things we might be tackling, but certainly in the blockchain world, that's a big question. The short answer is, to my mind, there are lots of tokens that are not securities, and you can certainly structure a token so that it is a security. What I've said quite publicly and quite often is it's really a facts and circumstances determination under U.S. law. It's really important to understand the project and its native token, what the functions and features of that token are, how it's to be used on the blockchain. And once you're able to understand all of that, you can really do an analysis of whether or not you think the token is a security.
Awesome. I just wanted to mention the Howey test. That's a test that
under U.S. law. The Howey case actually involved a situation where W.J. Howey Company was an owner of orange groves, and they were selling portions of the orange grove to people, and then they would work the orange grove for the people who bought the portion and share the profits from the sale of the oranges from that orange grove. Chitra Raghavan, by the way, wrote a great article about the original Howey Company and how it followed through to the Supreme Court case. Came out in Forbes. I can't remember exactly when during the fall, but you should definitely look up that article. It's really interesting about the whole history there.
Okay, yeah. I usually think about eating an orange or an apple versus selling the land that grows the apple or orange.
Yeah. Well, and you've just hit on a really important distinction here, right? Because in the Howey case, the Supreme Court didn't say that orange groves were a security. They didn't say that orange trees were a security, and they didn't say that oranges were a security. What they said was, because there was a contract relating to the sharing of the profits from the orange grove, that contract was a security. So when we think about this in the context of tokens, and getting back to your question of, what's a security token, what's not a security token or a utility token, it's important to remember that there may be a contract relating to the tokens that is a security, but that doesn't change the underlying nature or character of the tokens. In other words, oranges don't become securities, and in many situations, I don't think tokens become securities either.
Okay, and I, in my lifetime, have done a lot of revenue share deals. And I'm not sure every one of my revenue share is a security either. So, interesting.
That's an excellent point and a very interesting question. But look, you're hitting on this really funky area in the law right now, because the technology is challenging preconceived notions of what is a security and what's not a security. We refer back to the Howey case, to the Howey test, which is from 1946, and the test is actually probably pretty good for evaluating whether or not tokens are securities. It's really the way people apply that test that gets a little tricky. And sometimes people lose sight of the fact that just because it's new technology doesn't mean that it necessarily changes the way you should be thinking about things. So that's a little bit of the tension in the industry right now.
I agree. What are your thoughts about airdrops, ICO, marketing bounties, and proof of burn schemes? Are they security?
So one of the things that we've been talking with clients about for quite a number of months now is what we call the manner of sale of the token. And all the things that you just mentioned relate to manner of sale, by and large. What I mean by manner of sale is, what do you do to promote the sale of your tokens? I think the reason that token launches themselves get so much attention from securities regulators is because they feel like an IPO, or they feel like a financial instrument is being sold in a big public offering. When you step away from that ICO or token launch and you look at more contained ways of distributing your tokens, more contained ways of selling your tokens so that people adopt your blockchain, using techniques like airdrops and some of the other things that you mentioned, using techniques like generating tokens upon proof of work by miners, or giving tokens out as incentives within your blockchain, making people do some work for those tokens. That looks a lot different than one big giant token sale, which may make the regulators feel like there's something that needs to be regulated there.
I wanted to, well, I mean, regarding airdrops, marketing bounties, I think a lot of traditional companies do that today. They incentivize. I remember when Yahoo first launched, they gave away stocks. And I remember, PayPal gave away money, right, to sign up. So I think startups use different ways to incentivize users for growth and also to build community. Sometimes Kickstarters do the same. So I, think that the airdrops or bounties might help, build communities. So I wanted to ask you about a shaft model if you're doing an ICO today. Just briefly, if you're doing an ICO today, would you use the shaft model?
The SAFT, look, I've made some public statements about the SAFT. I don't necessarily agree with all of the underlying theory behind it. It was a good step forward. I think it was a good part of the debate, but I think there's other models that may serve people better. The important thing to my mind, again, is just like we evaluate the tokens and the platform's functions and features in doing the securities law analysis, coming up with the right model for quote-unquote distributing tokens also varies depending on the project. So when we look at different projects, we try to give them advice that's more tailored to their needs, tailored to the way that they work and what would seem to work well for them. And the SAFT, I think, is not always or not often the right solution for people.
Yeah, just everyone, just a little history of the shaft. So in traditional normal funding, there's something called, is it simple? Is it like
Simple Agreement for Future Equity?
Yeah.
The SAFE?
The SAFE, yeah.
Yep.
So there was a SAFE, and then someone created the shaft. And it's supposed to make the token sale process easier, where the document is a security, and then once there's a website or a minimal viable product, then when there's utility, I guess, it becomes a utility. The token, I mean, yeah. So, and there's some controversy about that. And you could
I think that's right.
Yeah, and you could look it up.
Yep. The different people have expressed different viewpoints about it, and I've been part of a group, including Aaron Wright from Cardozo Law School here in New York, that worked on a paper that was designed to point out some of the potential limitations to the SAFT. But look, as I said, it was an important development. I think it was good thinking, a good attempt at moving things forward, but maybe didn't quite meet all of the needs of all of the people in the community.
Yes, and I wanted to also add that the SEC looks at different, like a number of factors, not just utility. So, and just because the agreement is structured as a security doesn't mean that the SEC will not look at how distribution is done and a number of other factors. So definitely talk to a lawyer. Talk to a lawyer.
I think that's very good advice, and I'm not just saying that because I want more clients. I mean, this is a really tricky area right now, and people are really struggling with coming up with good ways to do these token sales. And it's hard. It's challenging a lot of preconceived notions, as I said before. It's making people think about things in new ways, all of which is very exciting and I find very cool, but also challenging. It's hard to know what the right advice is for clients. It's hard to be able to give them good advice when there's not a lot of clarity from the regulators. So definitely talking with a lawyer and understanding what the possibilities are, what the risks of any given course of action are, and really giving some thought about this is important. Let me just make one more point in this area. Technologists sometimes say, look, why can't we just do what the technology lets us do? And the answer to that is, well, look, when you code the technology to make it do something a particular way, you write the code, and the code dictates how the system functions. And what lawmakers have done and what regulators have done is they've written code that makes the broad system function. The United States function. Individual states function. Other countries function. So we call the consolidated or the collected laws of the United States the U.S. Code. That's what lawyers call it. That's what the books are called. And that's code just like when you write code to create software. So we've got a code for how things are supposed to be done. It's not always 100% clear, and blockchain tokens are pointing up areas where it's not clear. But that code is no different than writing code for your technology.
Yeah, I think I was in certain conversations with people where they were like, "Well, why does the SEC have to care if people can play the lottery?" And I think for public companies, they usually have to file different things with Agar and comply with securities law, so that the public can rely on these information and make a better judgment on investment, right? And and other things.
Yep.
So I think with crypto, I think I have a sense, that there's excitement, but yet we still need to protect the public from fraud and a number of other things.
I think that's exactly right. One of the things that we tell all of our clients, one of the things that I say in a lot of my speaking engagements is don't commit fraud. There's securities fraud, there's commodities fraud, there's consumer fraud, there's all different kinds of possibilities of fraud. And we don't want people out there committing fraud because it gives the community a bad name It gives blockchain a bad name. It gives blockchain tokens a bad name. So from my perspective, when people commit fraud, that's a problem. I applaud anybody who goes after fraudsters.
So Lee, let's switch a little bit to DAOs. What are your thoughts about DAOs, which is DAOs? Who is liable for the company? How do profit shares work? Is there any precedent for an IPO?
So DAOs are sort of an interesting creature, and they point up another nuance that the law is going to have to deal with. So a DAO, I think sort of its purest form, is where a distributed group of participants on a blockchain make decisions, essentially by voting. And in doing so, there is no central authority. The technology just makes things happen in accordance with the vote. So it creates this interesting situation where you don't have a centralized authority, where you don't have, quote unquote, someone responsible, and that poses some challenges in the law. Anytime you have a peer-to-peer type of a transaction, so I bake some cookies and you buy them from me, that's a form of commerce. When you move that form of commerce onto a blockchain, I don't think that changes its essential character, as long as the blockchain token represents the chocolate chip cookies that I baked. But if that blockchain token represents a security or it represents something else, then you start to run into challenges because of the different laws. The way that I like to think about it is what I call contextual regulation. When we recognize that blockchain is a technology, not an industry, then we can start to say when you implement that technology in a particular industry, the restaurant industry, the healthcare industry, the energy industry, the automotive industry, the insurance industry, you can go on and on. When you implement that technology in a particular industry, that industry comes with pre-existing regulation. So you've got to look at the context in which the technology is being implemented, and that will point you in the direction of a lot of the regulation you need to understand. It'll point you in the direction of the way you need to code things, if you will. So when you look at DAOs, it's equally important that you look at the particular DAO and the industry that it's being implemented in or with respect to. Then you start thinking about what the regulation is in that industry, and hopefully that will point you in the direction of how you want the DAO to be functioning and what the regulatory issues are.
Okay. Yeah. Now I'm just thinking about whether there are regulations for some of the stuff. Certainly there are.
Well, I mean, healthcare is a great example, right? There's some potentially really cool applications for blockchain in healthcare. And yet, there's a huge amount of regulation in healthcare.
Yeah.
Some of that regulation is from the government, but some of that regulation is from the industry itself, right? The insurance carriers, the insurance companies that pay for the healthcare, they want to regulate things in a particular way, and they want to determine when they're paying and when they're not paying, et cetera.
Yeah.
Doctors and other providers like hospitals, they have their own regulation, and they want to make sure that things function a certain way.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I was at PayPal for a while, and even in the payment space, you have credit card governance, right? And then you have banks, so there's just really a number of different variables that you would consider, you need to get your state licenses. You need to work with the banks. You have the credit card. You have merchant acquirers. You have clearinghouses, and just a whole system of things. So one would look at before starting a company, or looking at some of the laws in the area. In terms of coin governance, do you think that the interests of investors and companies align in general? I'm talking about like these token sale companies and a lot of the decentralized investors. Because I think people talk about coin governance, but they don't talk about coin governance. Like I've been to a lot of conferences where coin governance is spoke about as a very, very big concept. However, I haven't really seen detail on coin governance.
I think issues of governance and issues of creation of crypto economies are really fascinating. I think people are going to be studying those issues. I think economists are going to be studying those issues. I think technologists are going to be studying those issues, and people are really going to give a lot of thought to how governance works in decentralized organizations or decentralized systems. And I think they're also going to be thinking a lot about how do you create a crypto economy with incentives so that governance happens naturally and in a way that's productive for all of the participants, as opposed to favoring some and creating, for lack of a better term, centralization because certain participants are favored.
Mm-hmm.
If you really buy into the ethos around decentralization, you need to have some kind of governance that doesn't create centralized authority. Otherwise, you sort of defeated the idea behind decentralization.
No, I agree with you. I think the idea, and I'm excited about it, right? Because, I think in the startup community, we have a lot of VCs, and, data has shown that they usually invest in, a certain kind of mill, that look a certain way. So, I think decentralized investors allowed, people from a different location and, a diverse group of founders to raise money, and also to create products that benefit the community, right, the world. So I'm excited about that, and just in terms of, I guess, token economics and coin governance, is there, with interests of the investor and the token sale companies, would they conflict? Do you think there's any conflict of interest, I guess?
I think that's a good question. I think one thing that some people try to do to compensate for that is they set up these foundations or nonprofits associated with the project and try to move it away from, again, that idea of centralization. So these are really important questions that you're asking. I'm not sure that I have good answers to them, frankly. I think these are, just like the legal issues, I think these are things that people are trying to puzzle through and think about.
Yeah. I think because I've seen, usually companies create a foundation and they have their own proprietary organization, right? But if the foundation covers is very broad enough and serves the same space that their proprietary company is in, then, certainly there may be conflict. But, I think, I agree with you that these are just really interesting questions and or concepts, topics, right? That may unfold before us.
Yes. Well, and I think these are great topics for people to be discussing and debating. Right now, when I go to conferences about tokens and ICOs and everything like that, and a lot of the focus is on the particular legal issues, a lot of focus is on how to raise the money, et cetera, and there hasn't been, I don't think, as much focus on how do you develop a really good crypto economy? How do you develop really good governance structures? How do you do those things in a way that's consonant with the ethos of decentralization, et cetera, et cetera? And teaching people how to evaluate the crypto economy and governance structures that are created by projects. So it's really interesting. I'll just make one more point on this because I really do find it very fascinating. You look at the community around the decentralized community around a particular blockchain, and you've got a community, and you've got community dynamics there. I was talking with somebody the other day on my podcast, and she was saying, you can look at these sort of from an anthropological perspective, just like one might study a tribe in the Andes that hasn't had contact with the modern world at all or very much, and it's a community that develops and tries to thrive and tries to accomplish things. But it's also a community where there are certain built-in incentives by the creators of the blockchain or the creators of the community before it sort of launched and became this decentralized cooperative or decentralized organization. And just studying the dynamics and studying the way that people interact and studying the way that the community develops or not, I think is just really interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about the fiduciary duties to these decentralized investors. So when you create a company where you're on the board or you're CEO, you have certain fiduciary duty, duty of care, confidentiality, and a number of things. Do you think there should be, if there aren't already, any duties to these decentralized investors? Hopefully there's some duty to be honest, right? Or transparency, or no, not fraud.
Look, that as I said earlier, that's the basic for me, right? Don't commit fraud. Yeah, I mean, look, when you're creating a blockchain, when you're creating a technology, when you're setting it loose in the world, you should act responsibly. There's no doubt about that. I think that's not special to blockchain. That's the way that people, in my view, should comport themselves when they're out in the world. You have to have responsibility for yourself. You have to have responsibility for those around you. You have to have responsibility, at least some sense of responsibility, to the rest of the world. It doesn't mean that you can't do lots of things. It doesn't mean that you can't earn lots of money or take lots of drugs or whatever, but you should do it in a way that is at least somewhat responsible to the world around you. And the same holds true here.
So what are some?
Sorry if I just sounded overly idealistic there, and maybe I sounded a little bit like I was lecturing everybody. But look, the world doesn't function if everybody feels no responsibility to anybody else or to the world at large. And I think that's what people are trying to build into blockchains. I think the really thoughtful creators of blockchains are looking at it as a way to create a sense of community and responsibility within that community, maybe even to have that sense of community and responsibility continue to grow out as the blockchain thrives and as the blockchain becomes part of the wider world around it.
Yeah, and I think about, how do you, as a person, impact, the world's population, which is it 7 billion now? I think it's a lot more now. I checked the other day, but I think for education, I think about 70% are still illiterate. They cannot read, and I think 90% do not have healthcare. And I think the decentralization could help with a number of these, challenges around the world, and if we are to create a decentralized application that impacts so many people, then there should also be a very fundamental duty, right, or a basic responsibility to at least be honest and be true.
I agree with you 100%.
So what are some of your recommended best practices for companies?
Well, there's 5 things that I try to stress with everybody. You've already heard the first one, which is don't commit fraud. But not committing fraud, right? That's about making good disclosures. That's about telling people what you're doing and why, and explaining what the vision is, what the functionality is, et cetera, et cetera. And that sort of leads into my second recommendation for everybody, which is have a good white paper. Spend time thinking about what you're trying to accomplish, how you're going to use blockchain, what the token's going to do, how your crypto economy is going to work, how the governance is going to work, and write that up in a white paper that people can understand. There's definitely going to be technical stuff that non-technical people like myself may or may not understand, and there's definitely going to be general stuff that everyone will understand. But to my mind, it's really important to have a fully realized vision in your white paper so that people know what they're getting into when they participate on your blockchain. The third thing that we tell everybody, and this is something that you brought up earlier, is that these blockchains, these token sales, are global events. Just because you solve the legal and regulatory questions in the United States doesn't mean that you've solved them everywhere else in the world. You need to think about what the implications are in other countries. Or maybe you're not based in the United States and you haven't solved the U.S. law issues, but you solved the issues in your local jurisdiction. Again, you still have to look beyond your borders because blockchain is borderless. The fourth thing that we tell everybody is don't forget about the tax man. The taxing authorities like to make sure that they collect taxes when they're due. Just because you're decentralized and global and blockchain doesn't mean that you may not have tax obligations. And you can consult with tax lawyers and accountants and get them involved so you can figure out what your tax implications are, and you may want to do some structuring with legal entities that are located in certain jurisdictions to try to reduce your taxes or eliminate your taxes. But those are all going to be very important things to remember when you're working on your project. The last thing that we talk about is actually once your blockchain is up and running, you got a community. And you need to allow that community to communicate with each other. You need to update that community on the things that you're doing and the things that are happening in the blockchain. If there's going to be upgrades to the infrastructure, maybe you've got open source code. Could be lots of different things that are going on. And if you don't communicate, if you neglect your community, then you may have no community at the end of the day to continue to participate on the blockchain. Look, different blockchains do different things. There are tons of different applications for blockchain. And the level of creativity that we see from our clients and the people we talk with is just unbelievable. It's amazing. It's actually one of the reasons why I find this such a great area to work in. But you do have to communicate. You got to let people know what's going on so that they can make intelligent decisions about how they're going to function in your blockchain and what they're going to be doing.
I agree, and I think it's important to protect the community's information, right? KYC and AML and all that stuff. So I would be really mad if I were to participate in a utility sell, a token sell, and the company doesn't protect my data. So I just,
no doubt.
Yeah, yeah. I think part part of, of the community is really making sure that your community is safe. And then there's boundaries and guarding those boundaries. I think that's very, very important because, really you don't want your community's like birthday and all the other information out in public, right? I mean, they believe in
absolutely.
you. They believe in you. They believe in your projects. Make them safe, protect them.
Yep, I absolutely agree with you.
And then there's IP. I think we mentioned a little bit about it earlier. So there's open source and there's private code. What are some recommendations do you have for companies who are doing a token sale in terms of IP protection?
So I am not an IP lawyer, but I have many very capable colleagues who are IP lawyers here at McDermott, and I typically recommend that my clients talk with them. One point that I will mention, and this goes back to the global phenomenon here, is that if you want to protect your IP on a global basis, that's a much bigger project than it is to protect your IP in any particular jurisdiction. So you just want to think about what IP you want to protect and why and how you want to accomplish that, either in particular countries or all over the world.
Yeah. So a little bit about IP, and I'm not providing advice, legal advice, or investment advice. Just wanted to just mention that U.S. has its own IP and trademark laws and protection. And even if you're registered in the U.S., it doesn't mean that outside of the U.S. you're protected. So there's like different treaties that would offer patent or trademark, or other IP protection. And so I think it's best that you speak with an IP attorney to figure that out and to make sure that you're protected if you choose, before you release something public, because it would impact patents and trademarks and all that.
Sounds like you know more about this stuff than I do, so I'm glad you're on the show, Michelle.
I'm an IP lawyer, so.
Good.
Okay, so I know there was a meeting this morning on this, and what is your prediction about the SEC and token sales?
I wish I had a good prediction. My crystal ball is very cloudy, or for those of you who had a magic 8-ball when you were a kid, situation foggy, ask again.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, it's been very exciting. I think every day there's something new.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But that's what makes this such a great space, and it makes it so much fun to practice law in it.
Okay, one last question. What is one advice you would like to provide to the community?
Look, I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give to people is to keep pushing things forward. Don't feel like you have to get frustrated. Don't feel like it's the end of the world just because we don't have regulatory clarity. There are lots of really smart people who are working on these issues and talking with the SEC. The SEC is, in my experience, very committed to trying to get to some good answers here. So keep things moving. This is important things that everyone is doing, and blockchain is going to be a really important game-changing technology. So let's keep pushing things forward.
Awesome. And if people want to contact you, they would go to your site and fill out a form, right?
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways to contact me. You can come to the McDermott MWE.com website and find me there. I am also on LinkedIn. I am also a co-founder of Genesis Block, which is a blockchain venture studio and consulting firm. You can reach me at my email there, lee@genesisblockchain.io. So there's lots of different ways to get in touch. Please reach out. Love to talk to people.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and knowledge with the community.
No, this was great, Michelle. I really appreciate you reaching out, and I'm very glad to do that. I'll look forward to seeing you next time I'm in the Bay Area.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
And keep playing that Jimi Hendrix.
I will. This is going to be my next song. So just stay a little bit. I'm playing this next.
All right, awesome.
Okay, bye.
Talk to you soon.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Bye.